Hi, Paulina. So, for the purposes of jumping straight in, a fuller bio does sit alongside this video, but to summarize and introduce you, you are a successful entrepreneur, a speaker, a soon to be author, having penned your own masterpiece based on your experience as a burlesque dancer. What the business leader learned from the stripper. The
Yeah.
book explores learnings from the burlesque world and applies them to your life as a business founder. I've heard you say the attitude of a stripper helps me in my business career every day.
Yeah.
I've too many questions to ask, really, so please just tell me more.
Oh my God. Yeah. So for a while, I've had this split personality, really. So when my business was maybe 2 or 3 years old, I was extremely busy, and there was this one day when I was walking in Piccadilly Circus, totally overwhelmed with all the business activities. And I walked past Café de Paris, which is, I'm not even sure whether it still is, but was at the time quite a well-known burlesque and stripper joint. And I just thought to myself, if only I could do something outrageous, something extraordinary to really get myself back into my creative flow, to do something outside of the business world. And in that moment, I decided I was going to learn how one becomes a stripper. So since then, for a few years, really, I had a bit of a split personality. I was so into my burlesque world, and I did a few courses with a school called the Cheek of It Burlesque. And I was performing all over London and even internationally, and I was super excited about it by night. And by day, I was a businesswoman running GrantTree, growing the company. These days, GrantTree is a 40 plus, 4 million turnover plus company that assists startups and more mature companies in getting government funding. And just like about any business, the beginnings weren't easy. So the burlesque and stripping and the opportunity to perform really provided me with that opportunity to be somebody else. And after a period of having that split personality, I finally decided to bring those two together because I started to notice that, hang on a second, as a businesswoman, I'm definitely influenced by what I learned confidence-wise, stage presence-wise, etc., etc., as a burlesque performer. And as a burlesque performer, I was probably a bit more effective and organized than some of my friends and colleagues because I was also a businesswoman. So I decided to bring them two together, and first did a TEDx talk, which by the sounds of it, you've listened to. And later on, I decided to write a book about it, and a book about how to marry profitability and staff well-being, all kind of chaperoned through different sections and chapters by the burlesque character.
Amazing. Funnily enough, I was talking to a friend at another agency in Bristol called Paul, and he in particular finds it quite inspiring to hear when people are take inspiration from one area and apply it to another, but the two worlds of business and burlesque dancing seem completely at one end of one spectrum and another. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. But interestingly, you said that each fed the other in terms of how it inspired you to do something more effectively or better, and skills you learned in one applied to the other. So it wasn't just one into the other. It was flowing both ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it took me a while, but at some point I realized that because I'm such a rebellious spirit, that applies both to me wanting to be a stripper and wanting to be kind of unapologetically me, and to me being a startup founder, and that there are so many lessons that apply to both. You know, both strippers and entrepreneurs like to stick out, like to be different, don't subscribe to status quo, want to really be different and unashamedly so. So there are quite, you know, even though on the surface it might seem like chalk and cheese,
Yeah, it's not your natural sidestep profession, I suppose, from one to the
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
But that doesn't make it bad. It just means it's interesting and not common.
Yeah, and it just became really an amazing outlet for my creative spirit, and also gave me some, as the time passed, I earned some very profound leadership lessons about particularly leadership from the feminine part in us. So I believe that all of us, regardless of gender, we have the masculine and the feminine leadership within us. And becoming a stripper has really got me to get in touch with my inner woman. So I used to be quite masculine in terms of my leadership style. So quite driven, ambitious, this kind of penetrative quality of wanting to go and impregnate the world with my ideas or projects or what have you. And being a burlesque dancer really got me in touch with my feminine flow, and really got me to discover what it means to be in my feminine flow as a leader. What does it actually mean? Because there's a lot of talk about empowerment of women these days, but nobody really specifically, nobody that I'm aware of, talks about, okay, but what is the leadership from the feminine energy? What does it mean? What is it? How to develop it? So quite a bit of the book is also about this kind of dichotomy of masculine and feminine leadership, and how to marry up the two to become the kind of leader that, particularly post-coronavirus iteration of the world, really, really needs.
Mm. Amazing. And what made you want to write it as a book? Have you always been an aspiring writer?
Actually, funny enough, it was around about this time, a little bit earlier than this time last year. A friend of mine, it was in the period of maybe about a couple of weeks, that 3 friends of mine told me I should write. And I was like, okay, yeah, if you say so. And then one particular friend, who is funny enough also a creative agency owner, we had a really nice lunch, and it was the first iteration of the book that both of us came up with, and it was just to have a good laugh. It was supposed to be called "Cunt in the Workplace" at first. So yeah, it was just one of those lunches where we didn't even have beer or anything. We just kept going with those ridiculous ideas, and we decided to have Friday Cunt Club. And I came up with a badge of like a vagina made of plasticine, and it was hilarious. Anyway, so Cunt in the Workplace. Anna, that's my friend's name, said, "You're going to write this, it's going to be amazing." And I'm like, okay, fine. And I came back home, and just to try it out, I opened the Google Doc and I started writing. And then I started writing every day, and it just flew out of me more and more and more. And by 3 months later, I had more or less the book, not the final iteration of it, because I think there's a big difference in something that I'm learning as a writer, a very big difference of this unedited stream of consciousness and what you might want to write, particularly as a creative person, and then, thought through content where you have put some effort into thinking about who it is for and why they would read it. So there were a few edits afterwards, but nevertheless, 3 months after that lunch with Anna, I had, the first iteration of the book, which was a surprise for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's a surprise to me to hear that, only because I have been fortunate enough to talk to quite a few writers in the past, and the vast majority, I would say, have always had a plan to start with, or at least a structure to the book to stick to. But it's quite encouraging to hear that you literally just sat down and started writing.
Yeah.
And you admit yourself it wasn't the final book, and of course you probably need to retrospectively put it into a form or structure that followed more of a narrative. But it's interesting, because I also know people who keep saying they want to write a book,
Yeah.
but can never get round to it. But you've
Yeah.
made it sound like it can be quite easy to at least start, albeit, is it harder the longer you go, the more words you have?
I wouldn't say so. I would say that it kind of empowers you, and you're like, "Oh, I've written 10,000 words. I can do this." So at first, and quite a few writers that I follow also say this, that let it all come out. One writer I know calls it the vomit edit. So let the vomit edit happen, and just don't try to edit yourself in the process. Just write it as it is, and later on allow for either opinions of others to influence you, or for a structure to influence how you're going to re-edit the book. But just let it rip, basically.
Incredible. I love the vomit edit, by the way. That sounds exactly what I was trying to articulate there.
Yeah.
And are there any maybe easy, quick lessons you can share that the listeners to this video can take from you and from the book to apply to their working life?
Yeah, for sure. So we mentioned cunt in the workplace. So even though that is no longer the title of the book, actually there is a section about being cunt, and cunt is spelled C-U-N-T, obviously with dots. So it's a what's the word? Not an anagram, an
acronym.
Acronym, yes, it's an acronym for curious, unapologetic, notorious, and trustful. So I'll tell you a little bit about each one of them. So curious and trustful are, in my view at least, the qualities of leadership from the feminine energy. And curiosity is about fundamental openness to the world. So there are a lot of political factions, a lot of organizations in the world that call for divisions. This is about being fundamentally open to the world. And trust is about trusting the process, trusting every moment, even like we're having a conversation right now and something is emerging between us, trusting that it's leading somewhere good and somewhere interesting. And unapologetic and notorious are, in my view, again, qualities of the masculine, or the leadership from the masculine energy. And unapologetic is about being unapologetically you, and not apologizing for your charisma as a leader, for your path, for what you've got to bring to the world. And notorious, it's a bit of an odd one, because I don't mean it in an ill-famed sense of the word, but more badass relentlessness. So Paul Graham, the founder of most renowned incubator, Y Combinator, most renowned incubator in the world, says that he invests in people, in startup founders who are like an animal. So they have this animalistic drive, this kind of relentlessness, and that's what I call notorious. So the lesson here is that it's super important so there are quite a few people that have the unapologetic and notorious, but don't necessarily have the trust and curiosity to be really connected to others, to trust the moment while it leads, to see the bigger picture. And likewise, there are probably a lot of people who are trustful and curious, so have a lot of vision, have a lot of ideas, but don't have the kind of the relentlessness and the unapologetic spirit to bring them into the world. So it's really important to try to marry both qualities, the feminine and the masculine within. That's where I'm coming from, and it's not easy, but that's the kind of wholesome leadership of the future that I think, post-coronavirus world will really, really need.
Yeah, well, that's become my favorite acronym, I think, now. So it's important to be a total...
Be absolute cunt.
And be a total cunt. Don't just be a bit of a cunt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a power word, by the way, with very rich etymology. And I think it's just a shame that we've turned it, into this most terrible word you could possibly say to someone. I'd like to be able to reclaim it and for it to become a power word, a compliment perhaps.
Yeah. Well, we should all buy the book and help you do that. How do we get hold of the book? Is it available for pre-order or is it out soon?
It will be available for pre-order relatively soon. At the moment, the best thing to do is to go to my either Instagram, Paulina Tenner, or my website, paulinatenner.com. And there's a way to sign up to my mailing list for pre-orders and for updates about the book.
Perfect, amazing. Two quick things before we end. Firstly, I'm obsessed with the idea of failing and encouraging people to fail more in general, where possible, where you can do so without real damage. As someone who has been involved in lots of startups and tried new things like writing the book, have you ever failed? And what have you learned from failing in the past?
Oh, massively. My first startup, the vision and mission were changing every couple of weeks, and we never really made much money, at least at the time where I was involved, because my ex-business partner then kind of restructured the company and did other things with it. But I would say that I learned the most while things weren't working out, because I discovered how it is that I don't want a company that I'm going to be in the future, how it is that I don't want it to run. What is it that I don't want it to struggle with? So yeah, I think that totally failing. At some point I toyed around with the idea, another lunch with another friend, of creating a fuck up meetup. There's a sailboat, which you may be aware of, but fuck up meetup where there would be no pitching, and the only thing you would be allowed to talk about is your biggest failures. So maybe you can take this idea forward if you like it. But
oh, that sounds amazing. Perfect. And lastly, if you could ask people watching this video to make time for one thing during this enforced lockdown, what would it be?
I'd say get really connected. This is something to do with honing in on the feminine energy or feminine side of your leadership. Really learn to connect to yourself, connect to your intuition, connect to your gut, connect to your heart. What does it feel like? Because most of us, and definitely that's me as well, we live from our heads all the time. And all the signs and all the messages that are coming from our bodies are very often just imperceptible because we are so preoccupied with the chatter of the mind and the so-called dashboard. You know, another friend of mine says he wakes up, he meditates, and soon after the dashboard appears, and he's like, he knows, okay, I need to do this, and those meetings and those business challenges, etc., etc. So try to avoid being constantly controlled by the dashboard of things. It's the perfect time to come within, the perfect time to connect to yourself, the perfect time to either do a bit of meditation, yoga, whatever works with you for you to get connected to your body, to really feel yourself in the moment, feel aliveness in the moment. Do a bit more of that.
Amazing. Very wise words, Paulina. Thank you. Well, thank you for giving us the fuck up meetup. Thank you for giving us the vomit edit, and for teaching us all to be cunts in the workplace. It was a fantastic talk. So thank you for donating this isolated talk.
It's a great pleasure.